Nigel Dodds.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the honourable lady from St Albans, and I think her speech demonstrates what has been a very interesting debate, in that I've sat through a fair amount of the debate so far, and I've heard very few speeches from any side of the House actually in favour of the provisions of the bill. So I'm sure that when we come to the vote later on, that will be reflected. I certainly hope that it will be. Can I deal mainly, Mr Deputy Speaker, with the issue of the reduction in the number of seats in this House? And I have to say, from a Northern Ireland perspective, that it is an irony, I suppose, that it is a self-declared Unionist Prime Minister, and we welcome the fact that the Prime Minister declares himself as a Unionist, but there is an irony that one of the first things that he does, and he didn't tell the people of Northern Ireland this, of course, when he was campaigning for votes in Northern Ireland in alliance with the Ulster Unionists, and the people, of course, gave their answer to that particular call. But it is an irony that he comes to this House and puts forward a proposal to reduce the number of seats and representation of Northern Ireland in Parliament, when it was actually a concession by a Labour government back in the 70s that increased the number of seats for Northern Ireland. And I think that irony won't be lost on the people of Northern Ireland, and it certainly won't be lost on those who voted for the Ulster Unionist UCUMF alliance. And I think that they will feel entirely vindicated by giving the overwhelming endorsement they did to the Democratic Unionist Party. I want to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I entirely agree with what the Right Honourable Member, the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, the member for Tarvine, said in his intervention about the need for consensus, the need to build a coming together and a consensus among all sections of different parties and this House on major issues of constitutional and political reform. And on this issue, this clearly hasn't happened. This has been rushed through. We have heard the member from Nottingham North, the chairman of the Select Committee, very eloquently lay out the lack of scrutiny that's been able to be given to this in pre-legislative scrutiny terms. This is a major reform, and yet it has been rammed through this House as a result of a coalition agreement, and the member of St Albans, who has just spoken, has very graphically described the nature of that agreement. It doesn't have a mandate, neither was a mandate sought at the last election by either the Liberal Democrats or the Conservatives for this particular measure. And I think that at the end of the day, the people of the United Kingdom, when it comes, if this matter goes through the House, I will in a moment, if this bill goes through the House in due course and there is a referendum, I fear that the people of the United Kingdom will give their verdict in very dramatic terms, and not only deliver a verdict on this particular issue, but also deliver a verdict on the way in which it's been handled by the coalition government.
I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for giving way, but does he not agree with me that there is a public concern that our politics are being manipulated for self-interest rather than for the good of democracy? And that is certainly exemplified by the undue haste that this legislation was taken through and the lack of scrutiny.
Well, my honourable friend endorses the point that I've been making, and I want to make another point in relation to the issue of the relationship between this bill and the devolved legislatures. Now, Section 11 of the proposed bill makes special provision for Wales, which ensures that the constituency boundaries for the Welsh Assembly continue. However, the Northern Ireland Assembly constituencies are tied to the parliamentary constituencies. Therefore, a reduction in the number of constituencies there has a knock-on effect in terms of the composition of the Northern Ireland Assembly. Has the Northern Ireland Assembly or any party therein been consulted thus far? Has the First Minister or Deputy First Minister or any of the executive parties been consulted about this? No, they haven't. And yet this is going to have a major implication in terms of the make-up, which was came about after much intricate, complex and delicate negotiation, and therefore at the very least there needs to be a proper consultation and dialogue with the Northern Ireland Assembly parties, and their views need to be taken into account in relation to that which affects the composition, operation and good functioning of the Assembly. And on a related point that has been already raised by the Scottish Nationalists in relation to the date of the referendum, and the difficulties in relation to having a number of elections and referendums on the same day. In Northern Ireland, we face the prospect on the 5th of May 2011 of having an Assembly election, a Council election and a referendum. Now, I think that Northern Ireland people are very adept in terms of switching between different electoral systems and voting in different systems, and indeed in voting on the same day in different elections. But it really is unconscionable, in my view, to have a referendum and 2 sets of elections on the one day. And again, there needs to be something done about that, certainly not at the expense of the elections. In my view, the referendum should be moved to a different date. Mr Deputy Speaker, I also agree with the points that have been made about doing away with the process of transparent representation in terms of the boundary review. I think that's a very retrograde step. Electors and their representatives are entitled to give evidence in person, cross-examine in person, and have these important matters examined face to face, not just in writing. And therefore I think it's absolutely wrong for the government to put into this bill, rushing through this nationwide review of boundaries, a provision which does away with the right of that face to face, open, transparent evidence-taking and cross-examination. That's a vital part of any boundary review, because it allows the issues to be explored in great detail. It allows people to see the common sense, to see a consensus emerging. At the end of the day, there's going to be no transparency. There's going to be no way of knowing what weight a boundary commissioner is going to give to various elements if it isn't being done openly. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is the issue of costs. Up to £100 million to be spent on all of this over the next period of time, at a time when we're being lectured about the need to cut back drastically, up to 25% in some cases in terms of departmental expenditures, on an issue, let's face it, which the vast majority of the people, as has already been said, have no interest in seeing pursued in any case. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I urge caution. I urge more time to be taken to get a cross-party consensual approach involving all parties and involving all the legislators and representatives from the various constituent parts of the United Kingdom.